Thank you for your interest in the Retained Recruiter show powered by iIntro. Before the show starts, I have a small favour to ask of you. Our goal is to provide you with the most insightful, helpful and practical recruitment knowledge and know-how from the best in the recruitment industry. If you like this channel and enjoy watching our content, hit the subscribe button to get notified as soon as we upload a new episode. Thank you again, and as ever, we're rooting for your success. Now, time for the show. Hello and welcome to the Retained Recruiter show. My name is James, and today I'm going solo and without my, I've lost my Robin to my Batman or Batman to my Robin, whichever way around Joe sees herself. Joe's not available to join us today and hope she gets well soon. But I am joined today by a very special guest, Dean. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Good. Let me just do a little bit of introduction for you on Dean, for those of you who don't know Dean. But Dean is a compliance consultant for UK Compliance Solutions. So if non-compliance is a threat to your business, then the opposite can also be true, which means that compliance is an opportunity. And that's what we're going to be talking to you about today. Just for your information, Dean has over 24 years recruitment and compliance experience, and he's worked with a lot of end clients and recruiters from small solo owner startups to UK's largest recruiters. And as a compliance trainer and creator of training, he's also worked with the REC in the UK, that's a Recruitment and Employment Confederation, for over 10 years. And he's a founder of the consultancy, which, as I mentioned, is UK Compliance Solutions. And if you want to visit that site, we will pop it up on screen as well so you can find it. And Dean is able to help you and your business and the organization navigate the pitfalls of recruitment legislation. And although we're very focused on the UK, we do believe that some of the conversation piece we're going to have today will help any of you who are from the overseas markets if you're listening in today, which we do appreciate. So it's all about keeping your business and you safe and helping you leverage compliance to build on and create new business relationships. So Dean, that's my little introduction for you. Why don't you just give a few words yourself on an introduction?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good summary. As you said, I've worked for the last 24 years in the recruitment and compliance space. So helping recruiters across the board, variety of different sectors, navigate compliance within their business to mitigate risk, also keep them safe, which is obviously really important.
Yeah, indeed it is. Now, it's interesting because the way that we've tried to encourage people to come and look at this is to try and ask questions. So if you do have any questions, do please pop them in the comments. We'll keep an eye on those and we'll pop them into Dean if they come through. But it's one of those areas that sometimes we're afraid to ask, really, Dean, in terms of those things. So hopefully we'll uncover some of the pitfalls that people are facing. But first of all, Dean, why don't you just tell us, because it's not everyone's cup of tea, is it? It's not everyone's favorite topic. But why is it important?
Well, yeah, I was thinking it's probably not the most exciting thing that is in anybody's diary this week. But the fact that people are here shows that how vital it is, because it is vitally important. I mean, it's a legal requirement. So, we have to stay abreast of new laws, new legislations to ensure that we aren't falling foul of any legislation, which could result in fines, penalties, and could even, prohibition notices. So you're going to operate businesses as a director of a recruitment business. So it's really important. But, as I said, it's a legal requirement. We have to stay abreast of laws and legislation. It helps us sleep at night. So it keeps our businesses safe. It's a solid foundation upon which to grow upon. And it's also really important as an opportunity to speak to clients about compliance and how we help keep their businesses safe, because our compliance is their compliance. So obviously, and if you look at my recommendations on LinkedIn as well, quite a few of those are from end client hirers who've contacted me to approach me about compliance within their business and compliance within their suppliers to ensure that their businesses are safe and that they are working with compliant suppliers. So it's really good as an opportunity to be able to open that conversation with clients about how we keep them safe and how we may keep them safe when others in the industry might not do.
Do you find, Dean, that in the market which you operate, because recruitment is a very fragmented industry, lots of solopreneurs, micro businesses, as well as some of the larger firms, of course. Do you find that there's a level of ignorance about compliance?
I would say not, but then again, I was chatting with a professional the other day that said that they'd been speaking to a company who had no knowledge of right to work. So in that respect, I would say yes. I think that often individuals, they start recruitment businesses and they have an awareness of compliance, but they don't really have an in-depth knowledge or the experience to be able to apply it to their businesses. It can be confusing. There's lots of legislation, lots of different legislation. So I think that it's sometimes I'll just bury my head in the sand and not worry about it, or I'll worry about it when it becomes an issue. And I've worked with lawyers before, and that compliance is the comparatively inexpensive thing you can do before getting it wrong that becomes really, really expensive. So being ahead of the problems, being knowledgeable about problems, being able to talk to your clients about the issues and changes in legislation and set yourself up as a bit of a knowledgeable expert in that area is going to give clients confidence that they should and will want to work with you.
If I could ask a question, and I'm going to try and ask some stupid questions, because I think these might be the ones where they're probably showing my degree of ignorance on this one. But and by the way, for all the people listening on this one, we're in the UK and it is pouring with rain today. And so if you can hear noise, it's because it's pelting down on the roofs of the buildings that we're in. I mean, literally throwing it down. Anyway, I'm just get back on track there. So I'm going to ask some questions which will probably display my level of ignorance on this one, but hopefully it'll help people understand some of those challenges. So when we talk about compliance, Dean, expand it out for me. What does that mean in specifics?
Well, compliance is understanding the law and legislation that applies to your business, and implementing that into your processes and procedures to ensure that you remain and operate within the law, and create as little risk to your business as possible. Now, in a business, it's impossible to have no risk. We all operate in environments where risk does exist. But the challenge is how do we mitigate and minimize that risk to our business, and also understand what risk looks like, because there's unacceptable risk and acceptable risk. So for me, compliance is mapping out your business, mapping out the legislation, the touch points that apply to your business, seeing where the gaps exist, and then addressing them. And you've got your processes, but you've also got your training. There's communication internally to not give people confidence to, if they don't know, to speak up, to say, this doesn't seem right, I'm not sure what this means, can I get further assistance, can you help me? Because they're the bits that kind of might get ignored but can be very costly to the business in the future. And it's that awareness that if people don't know what to be aware of, then they're unable to be able to say, is this a risk or not?
So in your experience then, can you give me an example of a typical thing that you think that is so obvious it should be done, but sometimes you see it just isn't being done? So, examples of non-compliance to help us highlight what compliance should look like.
I think, one of the key things that always surprises me in the recruitment sector is in the UK recruitment sector anyway, because this is a piece of UK legislation, is that recruiters don't know about the conduct regulations, or if they do know about the conduct regulations, they don't understand what the conduct regulations are. So conduct of employment businesses and employment agency regulations of 2003. So they've been about for over 20 years. But often when I'm doing training, I'll ask consultants and recruiters what the conduct regulations mean to them. And very rarely can anyone actually tell me. But the conduct regulations, they're the minimum level of standards that our clients can expect to receive from us as recruiters. So that's, our clients being our candidates, but also our end client hirers. So there's 32 clauses in the conduct regulations, some of them for temporary, some of them temporary and permanent. So it's our rule book, it's our guidance, and our recruitment functions based on those laws, that legislation. And if we're in breach of it, then the potentials are fines, penalties, correction notices, or perhaps being not able to operate as a director of a recruitment business in most serious cases. So it's really fundamental to running a recruitment business is that the consultants understand conduct regulations, but all too often they don't. So that does surprise me.
Yeah. Okay. So so the level of knowledge of understanding those 32 clauses, How is it implicit upon the individual recruiter or the business owner? Who has responsibility for sort of understanding that piece?
Well, the business owner definitely has to understand that, if they can't guide and steer their employees without having knowledge themselves of the legislation. But then also it's incumbent on them to raise awareness within their teams of what the legislation means. Now, I'm not talking about in-depth understanding of conduct regulations or agency workers regulations or right to work, unless that's a specific area of somebody's job or role. But we should have an awareness of the fundamentals of what the conduct regulations mean, what information we need to be asking the client for when we're taking a vacancy. And if it's a temporary vacancy, something that generally always get missed and the Employment Agency Standards Inspector are always going to ask is health and safety and what steps the client has taken to mitigate those health and safety risks. It rarely gets asked by recruiters, in my experience, but it's something the Employment Agency Standards Inspector are always going to look for when they come and do an audit if there's been a complaint.
And do audits happen only as a result of complaints, or are they just random or scheduled?
More often than not, what I've seen more recently, it is as a result of complaints by predominantly candidates. Responding to job adverts that don't exist is a common one. There's a lot of job adverts that are reportedly put into the marketplace for jobs that don't exist. Obviously, it's a big waste of time for a candidate to spend time creating cover letters and sending CVs for jobs that don't actually exist. But recruiters have done it and have been known to do it to speak to candidates and get leads and then further opportunities. But actually, you've got to have the express permission of the end client before you advertise a vacancy. And the Employment Agency Inspector are going to come and check, and they have done many times. Show me the permission from the client, show me where you've had the conversations, show me where you've got the express permission to be able to advertise that vacancy.
That's interesting. So it's good to know that, obviously we all know that's one of the bugbears of candidates, that recruiters are advertising vacancies that don't exist. That's been, since time immemorial, has been one of those little acts that's gone on sort of not unnoticed. But it's interesting to know so that the inspector can say, right, that vacancy that you advertised on XY job board, show me the correlating vacancy, and then show me how you've had the permission of the client to promote that.
Yeah. So, evidence.
Is that normal practice, Dean? Yeah. Again, because so I'm just thinking out loud here, and again, I'm just thinking treat my ignorance as a good test case for you. I've got a vacancy from a company. It's a real vacancy. They've asked me to hire. They've accepted my terms and conditions. If I then choose to put that vacancy on LinkedIn, have I got express permission there, or is it a bit grey?
Well, you would hopefully, you've had conversations, and you will be able to back that up with conversations that you've had. They may well have sent you information regarding the job that then enabled you to create the advert that you've put on. So there would be a defence, there would be evidence to back it up. The alternative would be the absence of any information whatsoever, or even that client on your CRM. That would be the other extreme of it.
Good. Okay, let's go on. I mean, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but I just want to expand out a little bit more. Talk about the risks, the risks, the risk to the business owner, to the recruitment consultant, to the candidates, to the clients. What are the risks that are involved?
Yeah, I mean, the main kind of risks I'm focusing on here would be the risks to the recruitment business owner. They're the ones that tend to get owners thinking about, am I in the right position? Is a business in the right position, or do I need to do some work on this? And there's no business too big to do work on this. I work with some very big recruiters who, will always take something away, even if they are very compliant, and there'll be things that they need to do better and can improve on. So even the biggest ones, but fines and penalties, obviously that's the one that gets attention. I don't know if sort of people are aware, but right to work, the penalties for engaging with illegal workers, that's gone up from £20,000 to £60,000 per worker, maximum penalty. Pre-February, it was 15,000 for your first offence, 20,000 per worker for repeat offenders, but it's just tripled in February.
And that tripling is just to be a real, deterrent.
Yeah, as if £20,000 per worker wouldn't be enough deterrent. £60,000 is, it just sharpens the mind a little bit and the focus, I guess. So there's the side of it where there are the financial penalties and the fines, so that's obviously a risk. In addition to that, there's your reputation. If you bring these things upon your client, they're probably not going to look favourably upon you as a supplier. It may well be in the press, so you have to consider the reputational damage and what impact it may have on your business externally with candidates and clients, but also internally with your employees if you're cutting corners. So that's obviously a concern and a risk. The time that these things take, the investigations, defending yourself, maybe it's a tribunal or a case, then that is a massive distraction which takes you away from focusing on growing your business, creating opportunity, selling, and developing. So I think that the risks that are involved, penalties, you've got your reputation, the time, and distraction, and all the time, the distraction, and reputational damage often can far exceed the fines that are going to be levied against you if you are in breach of legislation. But they're the big things. I think it's important for companies that they are aware of what they need to do and they do it, because what we want to do is avoid these things. So we've got this foundation that we need to be able to grow our businesses from. That's the important thing.
Well, I think the old adage that prevention is better than cure is going to be one of those things. And so what we say to people is, if you're interested in finding out more about some of these programs, then go to the website. You can see it up on the screen there, ukcompliancesolutions.co.uk, and get yourself up done. But let's move on a little bit and talk about things which people have on a day-to-day basis that look at, and just come back to compliance, but things like contracts, indemnities, best practice. What are some tips you can give to people listening on those? What are the pitfalls that they may be sort of falling into?
Well, contracts are essential. They're crucial to forming business-to-business relationships, and timing is really, really important, because as recruiters, excuse me, it used to be a requirement of the conduct regulations that you sent terms to your clients before providing services. It's no longer a requirement of the conduct regulations. So you wouldn't be in breach of legislation if you didn't send your terms and conditions, but you would put your business at risk commercially if you don't send terms and conditions before providing services. So timing is crucial. If we don't send terms and conditions, we provide services. On what basis are those services provided? There's a whole host of confusion that could be created in that situation. And it's not uncommon that scenarios exist where relationships are started, services are provided, and no contracts in place. You're probably not going to get what you expected from
fees are going to be played around with there, because there's no reference to fees, is there? So I thought I was working on X%, and I thought it was Y.
We usually, and whatever you hope for or expect to get, I can guarantee you your client is expecting a different figure. You just create unnecessary tension and conflict and communication that doesn't necessarily need to be there. So timing is important. So, terms and conditions before providing services, so we all know where we stand. Ideally, we're going to get a signature back. Now, we might be able to rely on implied acceptance if the client acts in a way that would lead us to believe, but actually, let's get the terms and conditions back signed, because then it's undeniable that the client has seen them, received them, and sent them back. Things to be aware of is, obviously, if we send our terms and conditions to our clients, they're going to be created in a fair way, but fairly reflecting our interests. If a client sends their terms and conditions to us, then they're going to be created, hopefully fairly, but certainly weighted towards their interests. So we need to pay particular attention when we're being sent terms and conditions by a client. And because they may put things in that we may not see, understand, And often those are things like, I mean, the common things people look for are, what percentage, what payment terms, those sorts of things. But the indemnities are a really big area to look at. That terms that have been sent to you, clients may expect you to indemnify them against various things that you have no control over.
Yeah.
Terms will say supervision, direction, control of the end client. Potentially, the client's terms are going to say you might be responsible for health and safety claims. You might be responsible for discrimination claims. You might be responsible for agency worker regulation claims. All sorts of things that they might want to get you to take responsibility for as in an indemnity that you can't because you don't have control over. So you shouldn't do. So we need to push back against those things, or at very, very minimum insure against them. But that may well not be possible.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I think that's a really interesting point there about the fact that because I think a lot of people, their eyes glaze over when you get down to some of those sections deep in the long grass, really, things like indemnities, warranties, whatever they may want. And it just says, the contract is the contract. And if you've put your name to it, and you've signed it, then beware. Are there any other things in the contracts where, I'm just thinking out loud here, where there may be a breach of compliance from the recruitment agency side that might have slipped into an employer contract or employer terms coming the way? Anything that you might need looking out for?
So just go through that one again. So a breach of.
So we've got these 32 clauses.
Oh, right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. Is there anything that might pop into an employer might put into their contract which would be in breach of those 32 clauses but not through any malfeasance, but more to do with the fact that they put something in which actually contradicts the regulations, so to speak?
Not typically in an employment contract, because in that relationship we're an introducer. So we're operating as an employment. Interestingly, in the conduct regulations, an employment agency does permanent recruitment. An employment business does temporary and contract recruitment. So we're operating as an employment business. So we're doing the introductory part of it. And then there's obviously the interviews and the assessments and the screening and various other things. But then the employment contract picks up the point after the introduction. And that's where our involvement, other than offering rebates or whatever other clauses we might have in our agreement with the client, but that employment contract would take up with the employee, between the employee and the client, and we wouldn't be involved in that. So the employment contract wouldn't breach the conduct regulations. However, our contract with our client, especially if we're using client contracts, there'll be a reasonable duty of care. And I would argue it's not a reasonable duty of care if you're not complying with the conduct regulations, which is a piece of legislation that you have to comply with in the UK for your recruitment business. Yeah. So I think you would be, in breach of contract with your client if you weren't aware of the conduct regulations and doing what you needed to do as per the conduct regulations.
Okay. Let's move on to one of the things which most people just associate with compliance, which is data. And data protection. I think this is fairly global. I mean, I know we've got various things, but I think that nowadays the data protection world is all around us in many ways. It's sort of thrown at us quite a lot of time. But what are your thoughts on data protection?
Yeah, I think data is key. Obviously, to running a recruitment business, we wouldn't have a recruitment business without data. It is all about personal data, client contact data, and client data. And I always say to recruiters that, aside from your people, your employees, and aside from your brand, your data is the one thing that you've got that other recruiters don't have access to in the same way. Yes, they could have got LinkedIn maybe, and yes, they've got the job boards, but they don't have your CRM of data and the relationships and the history and the knowledge of candidates that you've worked with in the past. Now, I saw a post earlier that over the last 12 months, one recruitment business, 54% of their placements were on their database. So all too often, unfortunately, I go to recruiters, though, that their databases, our CRMs are a step-toes yard of old historic data. So that is a failing of the business to see the importance. I always think the CRM should be the first place recruiters go. Mm-hmm. because that should be their live recent data where they've got relationships with the candidates who will speak to them and talk openly about the positions, rather than going on to sites that everybody else has access to. So for me, and I was speaking to my son works in recruitment as well, and I was talking to him the other day about housekeeping. I'm always going on about tidying his bedroom. He said, "What is this like? Dusting and hoovering?" I'm like, well, yeah, but it's electronic dusting and hoovering. You need to keep your CRM, and I say to recruiters as well, if you're if you're in a business and the database is a mess, create a database within a database. Make your bit of the database the very best it can be, because that will reward you and will make you money. Not only is it a requirement of the Data Protection Act, that we keep data accurate and up to date, and not for longer than is necessary, and not for reasons other than what we originally got it for, but also just the commercial benefits of having that data and individuals who will talk to you and share information with you about where they're going or what's happening or new projects. That is, rather than calling individuals who have no idea who you are potentially, that's important, but the live, warm candidates that we've got on your database are crucial to success and speedy recruitment.
Yeah, great. Dean, as we come towards one of the final points I want us to bring up here now is, because we started the show where we said if non-compliance is a threat to your business, then the opposite can also be true. So talk to us about the opportunities, about what the opportunities that come from compliance or being compliant.
I think it's the opportunity to set yourself apart from other companies, to be able to show to clients that you are aware of the legislation that is crucial within your industry, that you are aware of what you need to comply with to keep your candidates safe and to keep your clients safe. It's a vicarious compliance effectively, because our compliance will keep them safe. Especially in the temporary market, it's even more important than the permanent market, because we're engaging with individuals, whether they be pay-as-you-earn limited companies or umbrella company workers. We're engaging with those individuals on behalf of the end client. So it's even more important. It's important for every recruiter, but even more important when you're working in that temporary sector, that you are maintaining compliance to keep clients safe.
Yeah. Okay, so there are opportunities that do exist for us out there, and I think what's true for everybody is you can't stick your head in the sand about compliance, Dean. It's been around a long time, and you should know about it. As you said, the legislation was introduced in 2003, so here we are 21 years on. Are there any sort of
messages? Conduct regulations. I mean, the Employment Agencies Act was 1973.
That's even before I started in recruitment.
So legislation in the recruitment sector is not a new thing. It has been around, but in 1973 and even 2000, when I started in recruitment, it wasn't anything like it is now. We've had all sorts of MSc legislation. We had IR35 in the year 2000, agency workers regulations in 2010. So everything has changed, and now it is there's a large piece of work to be aware of the legislation that applies to you, depending on what country you operate, what sector you operate in. Indeed. And the type of work seeker that you represent.
Yeah. You're like a walking encyclopedia, Dean. So that was if that was a backhanded compliment, it was meant to be a forward-handed compliment. Listen, it's been really fascinating to listen to some of the thoughts you've had. And as I say, I recommend that you actually look at Dean's website, take a look at some of the advice that he gives and shares, blogs, other little bits and pieces that are going to be really helpful to you in your businesses as you go forward, because it's not going away. It's really important. And I think I want you to take away from this is, as Dean mentioned, use it as an opportunity to differentiate yourself. Because it just shows you run a good, strong business. And whether you're a small, solopreneur, a micro business, or even up to the larger businesses, I think there's some great things. So Dean, leave us with your closing thoughts on the importance of compliance, please.
Yeah, in compliance, it's essential. Not only is it the foundation to build your recruitment business on, and do it when you're smaller rather than bigger, because the bigger you get, the more challenging it becomes, and the more you need to sort out. But certainly do it, put it in place, use it as an opportunity to differentiate yourself with your clients, but also don't run the risk of some of these things coming back to bite you, because they can be extremely challenging, extremely costly, and they're going to distract you from what you want to be doing with your business, which is growing it and making placements.
Yeah. Excellent. So listen, one last thing. Today's show, obviously, the Retained Recruiter show is run by iIntro, which is the smarter way to recruit. And if you do want to book some time with us, so where we can show you, we actually thoroughly endorse everything that Dean's been saying as, following best practice and all good advice, please do book a call with us. The link's up on the screen there, www.retainedcall.com. But Dean, I want to say on behalf of the Retained Recruiter show, Joe and myself, who's not here, unfortunately, we'd like to say thank you very much for your time. Thanks for sharing all that information. And we look forward to catching up with you again sometime.
Thank you very much for having me.
Great. Thanks very much, everybody. We'll see you in a couple of weeks' time. Look forward to seeing you again. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.